Welcome to OnPointe, man.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
It's our Saturday morning. We call ourselves the #1 Saturday morning Christian-based call-in talk show in America. Probably because we may be the only one at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Well, you're at least keeping it real and being truthful.
In all seriousness, great following, international following, and just glad to have you on. So many things I want to talk to you about. I'm glad to hear you're doing well. I see you representing us so well. It made me think back to when you were running for the Senate the first time. It was about the time that we met. And I wondered, what would you say are the top 3 principles that prepared you for this season in your life?
I think one of the greatest blessings and principles is experience.
Okay.
I had a chance to be the mayor of Newark during some of its toughest years. We had a Republican governor, we had a global recession, and yet we were able to find ways to score big points. And so experience is number 1. Number 2 is, I have to say, staying grounded in faith, not losing that solid rock, to know that even when it's troublesome times, to lower to your knees, and to get that kind of endurance. And then the third one for me personally has been keeping a faith community around you.
Sure.
And my family got closer during this pandemic. We now do regular Zoom. We pray together. And I had some tough days, especially in the last year or two. My brother having a stroke, and the relationship with the woman I thought I was going to marry breaking down, and having that strong community around you that when you hit those turbulence, that they can be there with you, pray with you, cry with you. Those 3 things have been invaluable. Having experience in governance, having faith at my core, and then having a faith community around me that's been incredibly helpful.
I think the element of faith cannot be underestimated. And also, as far as our relationships are concerned, the right people for us are not made, they are born. And a lot of times, we will tend to want to adopt a person into our lives that is not wired for the life we have to live.
Yeah.
And then, all of a sudden, it amazes me, and I know this is not what we're going to talk about. A lot of times when a person of great notoriety, people really get a sense of elevation when they're seen in publicly. But then when a relationship happens, they subconsciously want all that attention to turn to them, which means you have to change who you are to be with them. It's an amazing dynamic that happens so frequently. And that's why, many years ago, the Lord told me that special people for us are born. They're not made. As men, we try to create them.
I am learning that, and sometimes lessons are hard, but I'm learning that.
So I'm watching this whole Washington thing unfold, and I'm 70, and there are times when I actually feel as though I'm having the same emotions that I was having during the Civil Rights Era. It feels as though with the redistricting, with having to vote on voting rights, which is kind of disgusting to me.
Yeah.
It feels like we've been on a journey, but we haven't traveled very far. There are a lot of reports about the redistricting. If you could give us some clarity, that would really help, and kind of give us our listeners an understanding of why at this point in our history we're still voting for people to vote. It doesn't make sense to us.
No. Pastor, would you allow me just for a moment, though, because I had this conversation, a Zoom, with the head of the NAACP's board, which is pastors and leaders all around the country, and I wanted to detail them, because sometimes we see the losses and we don't see the victories.
Sure.
President Biden was with last night in the Oval in the president's conference room, and we were talking about a lot of the things that he's been able to accomplish because he really has been focused on Black folks. He joked with me about, you remember who brought you to the dance. So it's not just the importance of putting people in positions, whether it's the vice president. He's put more black women on the United States Court of Appeals than every other president in American history combined. He is about to put a black woman on the Supreme Court. It's not just those things. But we talked about black farmers and how they've been, over the last century, most of them since 1950, have been forced off their land, cheated out of their land. And what his program, really adopting some legislation me and Raphael Warnock had, has meant to hope for black farmers. We talked about black businesses. When they put out the PPP program, a lot of black businesses didn't have the banking relationships necessary. And so again, Biden, we worked together with him to create minority development institutions and community development finance institutions that help a lot of black businesses stay in office. And then something Kamala, the vice president, and I were very passionate about and led legislation on, couldn't get it done under Trump, was to make black women will die in childbirth at 4 times the rate of white women. And we were able to get a lot of changes through the Biden administration, extending Medicaid and other things to really deal with these challenges. So I can go on my list, and I won't because I want to get to your question, but I just want the black community, the black Christian community, people in general to know that this relationship that I've been able to have with the vice president and president on substantive policy in a lot of areas is real and making a difference in our communities. Today, the vice president, I joked with the people here in Newark. I said, how often does this happen where a black guy's in the president's conference room says to a black woman, hey, where are you going to be tomorrow? That black woman happens to be the vice president. She said, I'll be in Jersey. And I said, so will I. We were in New Jersey today because Newark has gotten every lead pipe out of the ground, every single service line. And we put $50 billion in the budget to do it all over New Jersey, all over this country. And young black children are more than twice as likely to be poisoned by lead than young white children. So these are the things we are not just talking about, but getting done. Now, voting rights, I do want to switch it to because this has been painful to me.
But let me ask you something first before I forget, because I'm a senior citizen now, so I have
yes,
to ask things state my mind. Do you think, I've been a lifelong Democrat, do you think we're doing a good enough job letting the people know exactly what we've been able to accomplish?
No, sir. I would give us an A grade in some of the things we've got done and an F grade, and letting people know that we're getting it done. And
to you, most people don't know anything about these accomplishments.
Sir, I just saw a poll about the child tax credit. When John Ossoff and Warnock won, I went to the president's chief of staff. This wasn't a part of their policy agenda, but I said, we need to extend the child tax credit, expand it. And 80 to 85% of New Jersey families got a tax break, more money in their bank account, automatically deposited. It cut child poverty in half in this country. And the poll said that over 60% of the people that got this did not know that this was a policy decision of the President of the United States and the Democratic Party.
Yes.
And so we are in a political crisis right now because what people are seeing is the deficits. But you run, organizations and businesses. You definitely have deficits, but sometimes your income and your deficit, your balance sheet, when you put it together, it's pretty good, much better than you think. But right now, where all the attention is going to the deficits, and frankly, I feel this pandemic we're all pandemic weary, sure. And there are a lot of elements of this that people are getting frustrated, like inflation, which is not Biden's fault. It is the supply chain problems that we've been having. Remember, supply and demand, less supply, higher demand, prices go up. It's basic economics. And a trend line of inflation was starting under the Trump administration because of the locking up of global supply chains.
I'm not sure people don't realize that inflation is largely not the president's fault.
No.
I don't think they know that. It's not he can't control. He can impact it, but he can't control it.
Yes. And what I'll give him credit for is, 13 months ago, right before the president got in office, we were losing hundreds of thousands of jobs a month. Our employment rate was I think, around 7%. He's driven that unemployment rate down to 3.9. It is now, he's now created more jobs than the last three Republicans together. And some of that is the natural re-clicking in of the economy. But when you pass the biggest infrastructure bill in American history, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, some of it already going out, as we're saying with the lead pipes being pulled out of the ground, it is creating jobs. When you put money not in the hands of the wealthiest, like Donald Trump's tax cut, the overwhelming majority of that went to the wealthiest Americans. Well, when you give middle class and working class money, whether it's in the child tax credit or in the stimulus checks that Republicans all voted against, remember, you actually trigger spending, which is really important because that creates jobs as a ripple effect through our economy. So he is doing things to help get jobs out, and things that, again, sir, I've said this a lot to the White House team and to Chuck Schumer, who runs the Senate, that we are not communicating effectively our wins.
I agree.
And we're allowing the narrative.
Yes, we control nonsense. Yeah.
And nonsense. I didn't even know what critical race theory was before the Republicans started jamming. I
thought I was the only black man that didn't know.
I did. I had to go look. I had to go get educated. So
none of my children have ever been taught it.
No. And in my schools, look, when I was coming up, and again, I know that was the 80s, but there weren't that many black people in my textbooks at all. Not to mention teaching what the Republicans are saying people are teaching. And so we are playing too much defense in our messaging and not offense in letting people know, because you are 100% right. When I said that to the board of the NAACP, it was a Zoom, and I could see on the faces that folks didn't know what he was doing for everything from black farmers to black.
No idea at all.
Wow. So we'll go back to that interview in just a moment. We'd love for you all to comment. What do you think, Pastor Nick, so far?
That was good so far.
Yeah.
But he's right. They need to start toting this.
Well, they're allowing their opposition to shape the narrative, and people are sitting out here having no idea, but how they're processing it.
Yeah.
Is that the president has broken his word, and we're not a priority. I literally asked him why. We'll ask him, and you'll see coming up, why voting rights wasn't the first agenda, and Build Back Better after that.
Yeah.
And then he started to tell me the couple things that were before that. That I, once again, I said, we have no idea what's going on out here except what the Republicans are telling us.
Yeah. And just say it. They've mastered the art of talking, even if it's not true. It's just
It just I literally didn't call them any names, but I said, you guys are playing softball in a hardball game, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And he was very candid about the fact that they're not doing a good job at messaging. I guess, Crystal, you ready for us to go back? You guys write us online, let us know how you're thinking. Come on, Crystal, let's go back to the interview.
Something that keeps popping up in my mind. Can you explain to us why voting rights were not the first agenda and then Build Back Better?
Right.
But
So
the voting rights would impact the redistricting, I would think.
yes.
Why wasn't that the first thing out of the box and then the Build Back Better?
Right. And so remember, the first thing out of the box was the American Rescue Plan.
Right.
And that was, again, money for our schools and our hospitals and black businesses, all kinds of small businesses. It was a massive investment. Remember, before he got in office, not one needle of a vaccination had been put into an arm. And he knew he had to create a national program to get people vaccinated. So the number one thing was to come in and get a recovery bill in place.
And that's understandable. That's quite understandable. But
and then number two was a bipartisan infrastructure bill. Biden came in and said, I'm going to try to find common ground. And he did, in what will be the largest investment in our infrastructure in American history. And that was the second thing, because he knew he could get it done. But while that was going on, you can be working on a lot of bills. There was efforts to get all 50 Democrats on the same page on a voting rights bill.
Okay.
So both of those were parallel. We got accord on the infrastructure bill before that, but we finally got Manchin and Sinema onto the same voting rights bill. And then now we had a problem. We couldn't get it done through reconciliation, which means 50 votes. We had to deal with the filibuster because our colleagues wouldn't overrule or get rid of the filibuster. So we had to find a way to get it done. And unfortunately, as we saw with the vote on the floor, it failed at 50 votes. It failed. So the Build Back Better is the same problem. Even though the parts of Build Back Better are wildly popular, sir, if you have Republicans, Democrats, Independents listening to your radio show, they will agree that prescription drug prices are too high, that an American company who sells the same drug here in America and then in France or Canada sells it at a fraction of the price, there's something wrong with that, especially when your tax dollars contributed to the research necessary to produce that drug. Everybody here will know that American families are paying the highest rates in the industrialized world for childcare, quality childcare. In most states in America, it's more expensive than even the tuition at the state college in that state. That we know we need to do something nationally to relieve the pressure and increase the access to high quality childcare. So I can keep going through the components. We've got to meet the urgencies of climate change that are popular amongst people, but we have not been able to get the two senators or my colleagues, Democrats, to go along with that and then overcome the filibuster that the Republicans are putting up. But I'm going to tell.
So
go ahead.
The question is, so we're back to messaging, because I can say without equivocation that most people did not know there were parallel agendas, programs being pushed forward. I think what it looked like was that the voting rights legislation was kind of not the priority.
Yes.
And the Build Back Better, which looked like from the beginning was going to get great resistance, especially from the other side. And just as an aside, I'm not a political analyst, but I think as it relates to voting rights, Manchin can vote no without any penalty because his state is 98% white.
Right.
So he had nothing to lose upon his constituency.
Right. Well, just a small clarification. He supports the bills. What he doesn't support, and I'm not his apologist, what he doesn't support is overriding the filibuster to pass the bill he supports.
So we can't help us with this. I'm boggled that two individuals can hold up the entire government. That boggles my mind.
It is. Well, I don't want to remove the spotlight from the 50 Republicans in the Senate who are also holding it up. Like they should.
We have the majority. We need to play hardball.
You and I both agree, especially because the filibuster in the Senate, it's not in the Constitution.
No.
And if you read the Federalist Papers, they warned about letting a minority stop the progress of the majority of the nation.
Wow.
And so I agree with you 100%. The filibuster between World War I and the Civil Rights Movement was used on average once a year. When a guy named President Barack Obama came around, think about this. The then Mitch McConnell used the filibuster against Barack Obama more times than had been used in all the time combined between about the 1920s and the present. He was filibustered Obama so much in order to stop the Obama agenda. Now, most of the time the filibuster was used between end of Reconstruction and the 60s was to stop progress for African Americans. Okay. It was used in the post-Reconstruction period. It was used, the longest filibuster in Senate history was Strom Thurmond filibustering the Civil Rights Act. So here is an institution, not from our Constitution, it's a Senate rule that has been used significantly to stop Black progress, that now we are seeing as the main block.
Absolutely.
Towards voting rights again. And why is voting rights an issue? Because us in New Jersey, we're a little privileged,
okay,
but most of the country, not most of the country, many states in the country, in fact, on average, the whole nation, a Black person has a longer wait than a white person when they're waiting in line to vote. Time is money. In Georgia, in counties that are 90% white, their average wait is 6 minutes to vote. In the counties that are 90% black, it's upwards of an hour, about 51 minutes. And in some black communities, the wait can be 5-7 hours. So if you are a mom with your kids in the car, with errands to run, working an hourly wage,
Not going to work.
It'll discourage you from voting. So so this is why this is a race issue.
Yes.
In the fastest growing Black and Latino counties in Texas, they have the longest waits to vote. This is a race issue, and Black folk, and these bills don't necessarily address this, but Black folks, we've been dealing with this. Remember, laws were written in the post-Reconstruction period. They're called felony disenfranchisement laws. You literally can go back and read legislative debates that say we are going to pass laws that say if a Black person breaks the law, and it could be a law, the Black codes, we're going to strip them from their rights to vote. That planted the seed for what we have today, which is large parts of our population. In some counties, it's like 1 out of 5 Black people can't vote because of felony disenfranchisement. And this isn't people murdering.
Let me ask you a question, sir.
Yes.
Why does it appear as though there's no federal response to the redistricting that seems to be happening across the country?
So, sir, this is why we vote, and why we vote, Americans and particularly Black Americans. There's nothing that's happened in this country where we haven't overcome, but for the activism of Blacks often engaged in coalition with others.
Right.
And so I'm telling you right now, we are seeing, as we just saw in Alabama, districts drawn to dilute the African American vote. It was overturned by a circuit court, but then the Supreme Court just decided last week to overturn their decision. So we are seeing racial gerrymandering to dilute African American votes. We are seeing increased voting times to dilute African American votes. And we're seeing other tactics like voter purges going on, where Black voters are more likely to be purged from the election, even though they're still alive and the like, than someone who's white. And so that
is that to imply that there is no response? There can be no response from the federal government?
There cannot be a response unless we have the votes to do it. We have to win the necessary seats. We lost a narrow election for the Senate seat in North Carolina in 2020, a narrow seat election. If we had won that, Manchin would not be in the pivotal decision-making position he is in. And we have a Black woman running for Senate now in North Carolina. She can win.
Some people are under the impression that our president could execute an executive order and slow or stop some of this stuff.
I
know this, but that's the impression they have.
Yes. And this is where the complications of us having 3 co-equal branches of government. The president, as we saw with President Obama, who was foiled by Mitch McConnell time and time again, including his.
They promised to do that.
Look, Mitch McConnell said, "I'm going to make it my #1 mission to make sure Obama doesn't get reelected." And so I know Joe Biden's heart. I got to know him well on the presidential campaign trail. I know as he reaffirmed to me last night, he understands that in that primary, when the votes came to the South, Black voters overwhelmingly voted for Joe Biden. He is a person who every day has people on his team trying to do equity and justice by the Black community as well as this nation as a whole. And so he is frustrated that we have not been able to get voting rights done, but he cannot do it by executive order.
Does he need to take advantage of the pulpit that he's been given and let the American people know what's happening?
I look,
because there are a lot of rumors swirling around about why this is like it is, but the messaging again is not efficient enough to let people know this is what's happening.
Right, but we are unfortunately in this country we suffer a lot from historical amnesia. You are of an age where you lived through. You were a kid, but you lived through the civil rights movement. The civil rights legislation wasn't just put up by one president. It was put up multiple times and defeated multiple times. So was the Voting Rights Act. Put up multiple times but defeated. But we never gave up. We kept going to the polls. We kept fighting for influence and power. And eventually we were able to get those landmark pieces of legislation done. Just because we have failed one time does not mean we can give up. And we are now fast approaching. It's 9 months until November elections. 9 months. And we can win Pennsylvania. That would be a pickup of a Senate seat. Now we have 51 senators. We can hold on to Warnock, keep that 51 in Georgia. They're up. We can win Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We can win Wisconsin. That would be 2 pieces. We can win North Carolina. These are Senate seats in states that are really close, where a high black turnout will determine where those states go. Now you have 52, 53 senators. Manchin and Sinema cannot stop us at that point. So I'm just here to tell people the reaction to frustration from our history, this is Black History Month. When John Lewis was beaten back on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they didn't give up. They didn't surrender to cynicism. They kept marching and eventually made it over them. And then Martin Luther King's speech, which you know, perhaps by heart, know in your mind, that he gave on the other end of when they finally made that march to the Capitol, from Selma to Montgomery, Martin Luther King directly spoke to the frustrations of African Americans. Some of you are asking, how long will it take? And I tell you, how long, not long, because the truth crushed to the earth shall rise again. How long, not long, because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. How long, not long. He quoted scripture that you preach. I've been in your church when you've preached that. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
That brings us to political process.
Yes.
That brings us to the overall feeling by the consumers of politics. There's a lot of meeting. For instance, people are happy about the January 6th committee. Yet, a lot of people don't expect anything to come of it. My question is always, we've got hundreds of people we've elected, but we only seem to be able to do one major thing at a time. That's the impression.
Right. Well, again, I want to just, as your representative, your senator, I want to tell you that there are things getting done every week that you are not hearing about.
Okay.
Biden has put more judges on the district court and the circuit court in this short period of time.
You don't know that.
Yeah. In addition, this week, we just passed out of the Senate an end to forced arbitration. What does that mean? If you are sexually assaulted in your workplace, your corporation, you didn't know this, but you were probably signing away your rights to sue that corporation over that sexual assault. We just passed a law that said they can't do that anymore to women in the workplace. These are things that are not capturing attention, but we are getting them done.
And here you go.
Yeah, and so
here you go. Your people are giving me the high sign.
Okay, I understand that.
One of the questions I get is, why does it seem that businesses are driving our COVID policy? Like, don't wear a mask. Like, even though you're positive, come back to work. Just wear a mask. Why does it feel like that business is driving our health policies? And I'm not a scientist, but I don't think they should.
No, I agree with you. And there's been some industries that have been, I think they should be liable, criminally liable,
yes,
like the meat packing industry, and the awful things they've done in that industry. So this is playing out in the courts. There are lawsuits all over this country trying to deal with worker safety. And there are a lot of folks, and I know members of your church have been forced to go back to work because they need the resources and have to enter into very dangerous environments, even though they themselves might be vulnerable. But again, remember 3 parts of our government: the judiciary branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch. This is an area where it's going to play out in the judiciary.
Forgive me for interrupting here, but we're
I got you. You've helped us today.
Pastor, I would like to come back.
I wish you would. Yeah, so we can talk some.
I don't, if you want it every other month, I'll come. You have been such a good, I still remember when you came to my debate when I was running. You have given me such spiritual strength in my life. And I would love to come back and talk through any policy issue you want to in detail. And I love how you are forcing us this conversation to really get at the details so people understand what's going on in the government.
That's what we need, and we'd love for you to come back with regularity.
Yes, sir. I would love that too.
Of course, you always have my support. If you need anything, just let me know.
Thank you. God bless you, and thank you.
Thank you for your staff, too. I'll talk to you soon.